perhaps for the first time. I mean, I hope you've heard about Paystack before today, but if you hear about if you hear about Paystack for the first time, we are an online. We build online and offline kind of payments for Africa. So we're about helping businesses in Africa get paid by anyone, anywhere in the world. And we were so excited to have actually launched in South Africa recently, and it's been really exciting working with startups and builders, businesses, creators, entrepreneurs in the country and across the continent to actually again better serve their customers when it comes to payments. Well, today we're going to be having honest startup conversations, and to do justice to that, we've invited some of the heavy eaters and what else, the up and comings, but those that we know have actually like played in the game. They have experience, they've been there, done that, and can actually speak to what it is, what it takes to actually build a successful startup on the continent. And so I'll do a quick roll call. If you can just turn on your cameras, and then we could do like a quick mic check just to make sure that everything is working smoothly before we actually jump into the conversation. So perhaps we'll start with Aisha. Mic check, all good with you? Audio, video, all good?
Good. Hi, Ron.
Awesome. Tinashe, video, audio check, all good? You're on mute, so we don't have audio yet. No, you're currently on mute. Yeah. Okay, let's give it a. Let me see if I can actually help you here. Can I? Oh, I can't unmute you here from my side. But yeah, maybe. Tadeka, you want to try that audio?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Perfect. Thank you. And Tobigo?
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. So we're waiting for Tinashe then to get going. And enjoy trying to get your audio. Okay, maybe Anela will jump into your DMs to help set that out. So yeah, let's kick things off. Thank you so much, everyone. I know you guys are busy building, but thank you for taking the time out to have this honest conversations. We think it's very important to learn from each other. Also, again, yeah. I mean, when I say each other, I mean everyone on the panel learning from each other, but also again the audience who are founders, operators, building things. They can also learn from your journey as well. So I think to kick things off, let's actually just set the tone. So perhaps again, just your name and how would you describe your startup to a 4-year-old? So we can start with Aisha.
So my name's Aisha Handel, co-founder and CEO of Sweep South. I actually had to try and explain what we do to my 4-year-old so that she could tell her class, and I failed dismally. So, but what Sweep South does is you can use an app on your phone to get people who are safe and good at their job to come and help you with various tasks that you need done at home.
That's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So I guess you've had some practice on that. So yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. What about you, Tobago?
Yeah, I'm Tebogo Mokoena. I am one of the co-founders at Akiba and also the CEO. What we do at Akiba, maybe before I finish, Tinashe, do you want to do your mic check?
Okay.
Hopefully this works.
Okay, good.
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Thanks. I don't know if I can explain what we do at Akiba to a 4-year-old, but I'll try. What we do is we basically help any small business access finance quite easily and affordably. I don't know if
so help business get money in a cheap way. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. What about you, Tinashe? How would you describe? So what you do, and then how would you describe your startup, Flex Club, to a 4-year-old?
So Tinashe, one of the co-founders of Flex Club and the CEO. I guess how I describe Flex Club is probably the simplest way to shop for a vehicle or for a car online, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, or whether you're someone that works on platforms. It's too complex for a 4-year-old, but easy way to shop for a car online.
Yeah, that works. That works. That works. Easy way to shop for a car online. I think the reason why I said is like I think I was reading a book recently and on positioning, and it kind of like forces you to really like condense what you do, because again, when you start building a startup, you could like, go 1,000 ways. But again, like okay, this is what we do. This is our core. Of course, you could do a million things in addition to that, but what is our core? And yeah, being able to like again say that in simple terms helps with that. Tandeka, you wear two hats, so you are building something, but you also like again investing directly like or building something as well. So again, same question for you, but again from those two hats, if you had to explain.
Yeah, so hi to everyone on the line. My name is Tandega Klaba, and I'm the co-founder of Digital Africa Ventures. And funny enough, I was trying to explain what we do to my grandmother the other day, and I just said we give people money. Zulu, and then she really got it. She was like, "That's really impressive. So you're a bank?" And I was like,
Yeah, I was gonna say
this is not working out. But to a 4-year-old, I'd just say we support business owners financially, but then also through general non-financial support. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so ideas, or I would startup often start as ideas. So you have this idea in your head, and then you're okay, let me go do a startup. But what we don't always talk about often is like, how do you make that switch? How do you actually make that jump from idea to product, or to like startup or business? Because an idea could also be like a hobby. It could also land up in the hobby sector, or perhaps the project sector. Is not really making money, so it's not a business per se. So I'm curious as to like again, Swift out, Akiba Ventures, Flex Club, and even Digital Africa Ventures as well. Like this was in your head once upon a time, and then you said, "Let's go build a company. Let's go build a startup." So like I just thought, probably start with Aisha as well. Like, just how did that transition happen? And anyone else can actually jump on that as well. Because I don't think it's actually like just one way. Like there are different ways to go from zero to one. But I think perhaps hearing examples of what that looks like could also help for other people to think about making that transition. So Aisha, how did you go from idea to we're going to go build Swift app now?
Yeah, so I mean, the origin story of Sweep South is my co-founder is my husband, and he's a software engineer by background. My background is first in the science field, so I have a PhD in human genetics, and then had worked as a management consultant before starting Sweep South. And so the story was that we were working through different business ideas, had just resigned from jobs, and sort of thinking through like, what do we want to do next? If we had to build a business, what would we build? And we settled on a tourism marketplace. And I'd just come out of being a management consultant. So the next thing that I did was put together a 60-page business plan for a tourism marketplace. And halfway through, I was like, I actually don't travel that much. And like tourism doesn't really speak to me. Like I like going on holiday, but apart from that, I'm not really in the tourism field. Like I don't. And so scrap that. And while we were going through the process of going back to the drawing board, our nanny said, you know, I'm going to be going away on holiday. And can you find someone to step in? And so through that process of trying to find a short-term replacement for her, we were like, this is actually really inconvenient when we're trying to think about our new business idea. Why don't we try and solve this problem? And so I didn't do another 60-page business plan for Sweep South, but we did use the lean startup methodology to sort of think about, because we were like, I don't want to do the 60-page business plan again, but I also feel like there's some things we need to know before we take the next step. And so we used, and we've actually still got the big sort of piece of paper. I think it's like a, I don't know, A1 or whatever, A0 piece of paper with a whole lot of stickies on it. And it helped us just like get our heads around, like how can we flesh out this idea a little bit more fully? And also what are the things, the components that we need to think about and then build to get it to an MVP. Like the most basic version of what it is that we want to do. And I think maybe just one other thing to say is like part of that thinking and that process was also going as we were putting those stickies down, like between the two of us, can we do this? Because I think if at any point there was a critical element of the, we were like, we actually can't do this or it's impossible, we probably would have rethought the idea.
So yeah, I think from what I'm hearing that, like, again, you could go 60 pages of business plan, and then again, perhaps checking if you actually, like, again, are interested, have domain expertise, can actually figure out what it takes to actually build a business in that space is very essential, or you find yourself having lots of false starts. And then you could go the route of, again, just keeping things very lean. And I think that's a very great resource, the lean business model canvas, on just, again, talking about your idea, market fit, distribution, and things like that. And just, again, make sure that you have all those things covered in a quick way where you actually can tell you, is there a go, no go, or what else can I actually get in place to mitigate any risk or failures. Yeah, so that's great. Akiba, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to Akiba. So it's like, for me, I'm like, how did this evolve? Like, what was the original idea and how did this actually evolve to what it is? So perhaps same question as you, how did you go from 1 to 0 to 1? Yeah, we could talk about, like, again, how it then morphed into what it is today. But yeah, curious as to, like, the original start.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the inception of Akiba personally was a beautiful mistake, actually a necessary mistake. So I was also just coming from management consulting, and like Aisha, I actually have a degree in the sciences, genetics as well, but one of the other majors was computer science. So I was always, in the software engineering space. So my first job was actually a software engineer before I went into management consulting. What had happened there is one of the key studies I did was actually in Southeast Asia, where we built one of the first digital banks in Indonesia. And I remember being on that study, we were super stretched. And I, remember being quite early in my career, but I had to be a tech lead of a cross-functional team split between Vietnam, Jakarta, and Indonesia. Jakarta and Singapore. And we had to build this bank from scratch in 6 months, right? Like commercialize everything. It was honestly, it felt like building my own startup, and probably sleeping, around 4 hours every day. But I remember there was a point where I had I don't know, it almost felt like a breaking point, because while you're on a 4-hour sleep, schedule on this company, right? But you start having this attachment to this team, and the product that you're building and the problem you're solving in the market that you're solving it for. But the breaking point for me was there was a bombing 5 kilometers away from my and I realized in that point in time that I love solving problems, but I don't think I want to do it as a consultant full time. And that was also because, mentally I was just in a different place, obviously productive, but at the same time, that lack of ownership really got to me. So right after the study did really well, came back to the continent, I decided to go do my master's instead and just take a break from corporate. And got into a master's in AI in Switzerland, which I started. Just 3 months before I left, one of my co-founders approached me and they said, "Hey, we're actually thinking of building a digital bank in South Africa, for Africans." And, that excitement got back, it got me excited again. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I'm going to do my master's, but okay, I can help out whenever I can." And I remember this one day before I was actually 2 months into my master's, but my visa was delayed, so I was still in SA. So I could meet up with these guys. And the one time we went to Thatcher's and they asked me, "Hey, how would you actually think about bank?" And without actually thinking about it, I drew the whole architecture on a piece of paper. And I could see the excitement as I drew every component. We wanted to build this incredible digital bank, post-blockchain technology, blah, blah, blah. Put it all down on paper. And I knew maybe this is, another chance to build, something for myself and also for the people that I really, want to serve.
Fair.
And that was sort of when Akiba started. But at that point, I don't think I made the decision immediately to say, let me jump into entrepreneurship full time.
Okay.
The decision, things that I had to consider before jumping into entrepreneurship was, do I actually have enough saved? Because this is going to be a long journey.
Yes.
Can't really tell, how long a bank is going to, monetize. And at that point, we didn't have enough capital. So it was all such a dream, which ended up being the first punch in our faces with regulation. So, but the point was, I needed to be clear in my head that I have personal financial runway of
Safety net, yeah.
time. And if I didn't, then it didn't make sense. So the decision there was, okay, I can drop out of my master's and use all those funds that I saved for my studies into, but it had to be at least 12 months of assuming that I'm not going to get any income at all. But yes, that was essentially the deciding point. And we know Akiba is different. So I always joke around, but we built probably 3 different businesses from then from now. Started and killed so many of them. But we are here, and
Yeah, there's definitely lots to unpack from that. From again, I think domain expertise came up again. Like, you had built this in Southeast Asia, so it was not strange and foreign to you to do that again in Africa, and actually brought about some excitement. I think also even just taking the time off from burnouts as well, because you don't want to go jumping from that into building something new. So that time to actually again get refreshed, get rejuvenated, to say, okay, like a clear head, what do I actually want to do? And the last was actually the safety net you mentioned, because yes, most people always have, I don't know where this actually came from, like, oh no, quit your job, jump and just again take that leap of faith and start building. Yes, it works for some people, but not for everybody. And so if you require to actually again buff up that savings, get a job, a 9 to 5, get your savings to a good point, like you said, a 12 months runway where I could go at this full time, not thinking about any issues that might come on the journey. I think that's really, really important as well. Quickly to Tinashe as well, Flex Club. I think what stands out to me is that you have presence in Africa and Amsterdam, from what I understand. So it's like there's a geo thing going on there. So how does how do you start a company with that dynamic? I suppose you have a founder here and one founder abroad. So but correct me if I'm wrong. But I just saw that on Crunchbase and I was like, how did this get started? Yeah, curious to hear.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I kind of moved out to Amsterdam a little over 4 years ago. And the reason why I moved to Amsterdam was because my career prior to kind of starting Flex Club was built with Uber. So I joined Uber in South Africa. And then after my first year at Uber in South Africa, basically moved to Amsterdam to lead the team in my specific vertical across EMEA based in Amsterdam. And by the way, apologies if you hear some typing in the background. I'm in Amsterdam and my mother's visiting, and she's very furiously typing an email to the church right now. So this is the new perks of work from home. These are the new dynamics, but love it. Yeah, I guess for me, I think it's a little bit different in the sense that I've been obsessing over the mobility ecosystem for a very long time in my career. Even prior to Uber, I was in the impact investing space, looking to kind of back some plays here. Then even in, I guess, like some of my fellow panelists here, also in management consulting to automotive companies in the mobility ecosystem or financing ecosystem. And then very early on, like back to like when I was 19 years old, like my very first idea was, hey, why don't I import some scooters from China and try to sell them to my fellow students? Needless to say, I paid some very expensive school fees with that mistake. But I guess it took me over a decade to get enough confidence to then kind of lean in and say, look, I've had all this experience now, 4 years at Uber, seeing sort of like what's cutting edge in mobility. And now I can kind of venture in. I mean, the way I see it, to kind of paraphrase a bit of Mark Cuban, is that actually building an early stage product is the ultimate sport. It's the ultimate sport with infinite possibilities. And I think it kind of just took a while before I had conviction that I could actually be, part of a team that can win. As I'm sure, many of my panelists will relate with, like they're like sort of champions or trailblazers in their own right, playing the game, and the sport never ends. You're constantly kind of facing these new battles. I think for me, it just took a while to kind of build up that confidence in this mobility kind of ecosystem. But then once I had that conviction, it then started to kind of flow. So it might look like we've accelerated quite rapidly over a short period of time, but this is like a decade in the making, really.
Right. I mean, so overnight success, you see the success part, you don't see the work that has gone into making it an overnight success. But yeah, definitely hear you that. I want to double click on the conviction bit though, because I mean, we have to be like, let's be real. Like we always have that. Like, am I ready? Am I ready? Is it now? Is it good? Like, am I equipped? Yeah, you have 10 years, but still there's that like voice that, wait a minute, maybe it's a little bit more preparation or all. So I'm curious again, just talk to me about Flex Club. That. Like, how did you go from saying, okay, let's do it? Like, was there a moment? Was it a conversation? Was it funding? Like, what happened to say, okay, yeah, I've got what I need to actually again kickstart this journey.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, one of the things is you obviously need the unique insight. There's the unique have also enter the arena and play the game, play the sport. Like what that for me, I mean, kind of digging into what Flex Club is about. I was for Uber across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And Vehicle Solutions is a team that I was building to now, structure deals with banks, leasing companies, car rental companies, car manufacturers, and understanding like, how does the automotive industry actually work? How does a car go from a production line into the hands of a customer? And we were trying to solve that for, at least in my case, in EMEA, we had over 1 million drivers that were using the Uber app. Today, Uber has over 5 million drivers that use the Uber app every single week, to earn a living. And the vast majority of them couldn't actually access a car. It's fundamental, it's critical to using the Uber app. Saying, well, part of the reason is that the way the ecosystem is designed is broken. And I think going through that journey with all these different stakeholders for 4 years kind of gave us the conviction that actually, we know where the cracks are. We've seen some of these mistakes. We've seen how they play out. In fact, we were able to kind of design products, make mistakes to some extent with other people's money. And now we're like, okay, if we have to kind of do this with our own skin in the game, this is how we'd approach it.
Right.
So, kind of fast forward to end of 2018, that's when we felt, okay, we've got a design. We think we can be players here. Let's talk to the investment community. Turns out they did. And kind of just, I guess, into.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So again, a few like checks here and there, like again, checking with an investor. Would you actually put money in this? Checking with a customer. Would you actually buy this? Like checking with again a co-founder. Will you actually join me on? Will you actually like follow me on this journey? I think there's like kind of like checks and signals that can help get you over that hump. And like I said, it spent a lot of years as an operator within a larger organization, and again, trying to say, okay, what like there's an opportunity here for people to actually, if they're playing the game, access this, they need cars. And so can we actually solve that problem? And that's one thing I think founders or startups actually look at. Like, again, you have a behemoth of an organization doing one business. I mean, for them to actually go focus on something else that helps that business, they might also require a startup to actually step in for that. So yeah, that does make sense. So Ndeka, you've seen a lot of startups actually, like, again, launch or that you actually fund or back. I'm curious if you want to add any insight as to, like, again, how you've seen people go from their zeros to one, perhaps even through pivots as well, and actually just again evolving what they're looking to build. From what you've seen as an investor. Yeah, anything to share?
Yeah, so I think I'll probably start off with my own entrepreneurial journey, which not similar to the rest of my panel, but I was in corporate before, but particularly in investment banking. And as one might know, in investment banking, you pretty much eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the only thing you go home to do is just put your head on your own pillow, wake up and shower, and come back. And being the only black female on my team, started to kind of I experienced the challenge of, if I wanted to like do my hair, my nails, and within the 8 to midnight timeframe that my previous employee kind of set, how was I going to procure these services? That was kind of the one part of my leap out of corporate. But then the second part was just, I couldn't really sit with knowing how much was happening or how many problems were being faced by the average South African. And then knowing that I could, play a role in bridging that gap, but then, also choose to sit in a comfortable corner office. And so I also almost abruptly, I guess, decided to leave my job and joined an incubator program that was run by the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. So to the outside world seemed abrupt, but I guess I also had to think about like, well, if this doesn't work, then what? And what support structures do I have in place to actually make this a success? Which was very helpful. So they provided grant funding and mentorship and office space, etc. And actually, one of the first people I called in building that business was Aisha, because I knew she was running a marketplace platform and just wanted to actually understand the dynamics of how marketplace platforms work. How do you think about pricing? How do you think about the chicken and egg demand supply issue that most marketplace platforms experience? And in my journey of actually raising for my first business, which is Glam Alley, I just came to realize how difficult it actually was to fundraise as a Black female entrepreneur. And ironically ended up in the role of an investor to solve or to be part of the solution. And so I think, just to answer your question, I think what is important is to do the planning. So from the outside in, it can look serendipitous and very glamorous to just resign from investment banking and then start a startup, but a lot of thinking and planning goes into that. So I just made sure to speak to people who've done it before, like Aisha, to ensure that there'd always be people who would hold me accountable through the Alan Gray program, but then also to think about like fundraising up to a certain point. So I was quite lucky to actually just be surrounded by an environment that came with all of the above, and was able to go from resigning to actually having a business that was generating revenue within 4 weeks. But then in that journey came to realize the challenges that come with marketplace platforms, which is disintermediation. Once someone finds someone that they really like, why should they come back and use the platform? Being a sole founder, so I did basically everything by myself, and then had a network of beauticians who were working on the platform, and just the burnout and how stretched you are as trying to build a business by yourself. And I'd say those were kind of like my red flags in terms of, this is the way that things are running isn't sustainable, and I kind of need to think about like, how do I problem solve around that? And in being an investor, what's been interesting to see is how other marketplace platforms have evolved around that. So we've seen marketplace platforms go from what I had previously done in Glam Alley, my previous startup, which was take commission on successful jobs, to pivoting to actually just being an advertising platform. So providing service providers a platform where they can showcase their work, showcase reviews, etc., and then just pay for ad space on a platform. And another interesting pivot that we've seen is Tinashe on this call. I have a lot of links to everyone on this call, by the way. But we initially started engaging with Flex Club when they were kind of pretty much as their primary business model. And what's just been remarkable to see, having followed the Flex Club journey quite closely, is just how the subscription model is actually picked up for them within the context of COVID and people not using Uber anymore. They kind of were very responsive and iterated their business model, which has turned out to be growing at very high rates. So yeah, I think those are the things that help in going from 0 to 1.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think I built a startup as well, and it was like years and years ago with e-commerce being the rave at that time. Yeah, speaking to just people who had done it before, I assumed that, we're the first, so there's nobody can give us advice. But I was like, nah, people must have tried this in some shape and some form, that you could definitely have learned from that experience. Like, why did they fail? Like, what worked? What kind of partnerships it made sense for them? Like, how did they grow? How did they get to customers? I think, really just asking people who have been there, done that, I think is really important. I think speaking to that again, your engagement with Aisha and also Tinashe as well, I think that definitely speaks a lot of volume. And being in marketplace, who's done it? How did you encounter the issues that came with that, and just learning from that? So thanks for sharing that. Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face, and I really want you guys to be a little bit vulnerable with us today, and just tell us the first punch you had in the face when you decided to actually start your startup, and how you actually dealt with that. So like, Swift's out, Akiva, like, yeah, we're gonna go build this thing, and you know, it said idea meets market, and you get whamped. And so perhaps curious to hear what that story is, and again, perhaps how you actually again came back, because you're still here. I mean, you're still building. So like, how did you come back from that? Yeah, anyone feel free to jump in.
I'll say, but mine, I'll be quick about it because we don't really have like a humongous, oh my word. But I must say, like, one of the things that struck me is that I think this is because I worked in a lab by myself for like 10 years, and everything that we did and the progress all depended on me. And then I got into the startup environment where firstly, the ecosystem was very early in South Africa. We launched in 2014. And also we didn't really we didn't have a strong network. So I just completely missed like timing on everything. I thought everything would take a lot quicker than it did. And that resulted in like personal burn issues, personal runway issues. We were using our own savings. We ended up selling our house, but we actually first cashed in our savings and pension, raised funding, again, like misjudged how long everything would take till we'd raise again, and then ended up selling our house to sort of fund like just our very, very reduced lifestyle expenses. So that was one thing. And then I think the other sort of big surprise was we had very high growth, I mean, in general, but particularly in 2016, at the end of 2016, and we hadn't really factored it in and hadn't catered in terms of like team resources available. It was our peak periods are basically in South Africa's holiday period where people want to go away. And so I hadn't catered for it, and it was a bit of a train smash. And I remember just waking up for like a week in December in 2016 every day with like heart palpitations, because I'd just be like, what mess am I waking up to today? And so, yeah, like a lot of unhappy customers. We never thought that like 2 years in, scaling too fast would be the problem. We always imagined that the problem would be like lack of growth. And so, yeah, had to apologize to a lot of customers, had to pull the team around to try and do cleaning jobs ourselves, try and, reschedule where possible. We were raising an investment round. One of the investors ended up being one of the people we let down, which was just horrific and so embarrassing. And it took us like a year to live that down. So it was, really bad. And I think some of the lessons were just like to rely on the team as much as you can, get the marketing person to be on the phone doing customer support if that's what needs to get done. Be honest, like if you're, in a bit of a, in a bit of a tough period, like say that to your customers and just be honest about where you are. And then fix it as quickly as possible. Tell people what you've done to fix it and apologize. And it ended up with us actually sending out an email to all of our customers at the time and saying like, we know we messed up. We weren't able to deliver the service. We let a lot of people down. Like this is what we've done to address the issue and why it's not going to happen again.
Wow, that's a lot. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I think yes, like it comes to a time where you see founders actually doing again, not knowing when to do what needs to what needs to be done, and just rolling up your sleeves. I still remember during my startup days, jumping on the phone, like again, trying to like just talk to customers. Your food will be there soon. We promise. We've called the restaurant. It's on the way. Please, just be patient. and we're just again doing that for like the whole day. And that's the job. But communication as well. Just again being open, communicating to those. And I read the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and it says about again like getting as many brains on the problem as possible. So many times with CEOs, founders want to be like, it's my baby. I'm going to like do all it takes to fix it. And you've got your team just there waiting, and they're actually like have solutions. They have ideas to help fix those problems as well. So getting as many people on the problem, getting as many brains on the problem also helps as well. But thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if Tinashe, Tindeka, anyone has any stories similar to that as well?
I'll jump. My story is not as deep as Aisha's is, and thanks Aisha for sharing that. I think the first punch in my face or in our faces really was regulation. I think we're very naive entrepreneurs thinking the South African banking space was open for innovation and young people sort of coming in and ideating and solving problems that are quite obvious, one of which is financial literacy, the other being that a lot of Black people or people of color in South Africa typically don't know how to even start building wealth, et cetera, and how do we make banking cheaper and accessible to many. And those are the key issues that we thought, we're gonna sort of address with this bank. And so we went blue sky, right? Blue sky being what is the fastest way we can deliver the service such that it's operationally, from a cost perspective is quite lean, but also delivering that service to the customer is quite cheap, but effective. So one of which is obviously digital banks don't have brick and mortar. The model makes sense. But the other layer we wanted to having a completely decentralized ledger, because that's also one of the costs. Core banking is a huge cost, core banking systems, that is, which is why a lot of banks can't really minimize cost or strip them away completely to consumers. So we wanted to do this thing on a post-blockchain technology. Again, blockchain is not something that banks want to talk about, let alone be interested in leveraging. And so on two folds, the model, this banking model that we're going for without any capital, by the way, to buy a commercial license was way too ambitious. So it was just honestly a dream. And so the first two punches at the same time, the regulator was like, cool, yeah, there's no way you're gonna get a cooperative banking license. The second part is there's no way you're gonna build this on top of a decentralized ledger. We don't believe in that. And SARB needs to find a way, the South African Reserve Bank needs to find a way to control, so it can't be in some ledger that's out in the cloud where we don't know where that is. So that was the second punch in the face. And we knew there and there we didn't have capital to really get I think at that point it was like 10 million rand to get a license, the cheapest banking license. We having a deep validation from the market saying that we actually want this bank and these are the services that resonate and blah, blah, blah. So we couldn't take that risk. What we did was we pivoted and went for another model that still required us to have some sort of banking license, right? It was a savings platform that allowed young people to start saving because again, our unique selling point was always how do we build better financial habits? How do we help people build better financial habits from the get-go? And so savings was sort of a natural transition into that. And again, after launching this amazing, whimsical product, which had its own errors, but we got a lot of customers on there and got feedback. The regulator came back and said, "Oh, interesting, you guys are saving. So where are you putting these deposits again? And why are you taking deposits if you're not a bank?" But it's a step ahead of the regulator. And there we said, look, yeah, we are aware, and we're leveraging this. This regulatory loophole that you have, which is tokenization. So tokenization is basically this concept of virtual currency or any currencies like your points that you get from the supermarket or e-bucks or whatever it is. It's actually points that give you monetary value. So you can go exchange them to buy something. And at that time, it wasn't regulated. And we said, well, yeah, people are not really putting money. So we're not deposit taking, they're buying virtual sheep. And so it's a trade. We are not, deposit taking. And the regulator again said, okay, that's fine, except we're going to be regulating the space in the next 2 years. So you need to find a banking partner, or get a banking license.
Wow.
And so we knew at that point, again, we had 2 years to another business model. And that's essentially how we evolved into what we do now, which essentially is leveraging, one of the unique selling points we realized was we have these nuanced financial insights about people's behavior, which banks were mostly interested in to extend and so we just decided to productize those into alternative credit scoring to really lower the barrier to entry for the informal market, small businesses, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it seems like it was like a catch me if you can game with the regulators for for your
Exactly.
business and all. And yeah, I think definitely innovation will always outpace regulation, but at the same time, it's always good to again know how to engage and know how to pivot and just again make those moves when it comes to building. Um, yeah, I think that kind of like touches on regulation a little bit as well. I also just perhaps move the conversation perhaps to another area which you mentioned. And I mean, there's the popular saying, African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And so I want to touch on two things: partnerships and team. So again, Aisha, you mentioned again, like again, leaning on your team to actually build what you're doing. Tinashe, I'm very sure for you to have a marketplace of some sort, or okay, like again, your really first club, you would need to have some strategic partners that makes this possible. Like how, like can you again let us talk through how you. Okay, let's start with the team. Let's start with the team. So founder, it's you, it's your vision, it's what you're building. Like how did you guys go about actually again attracting people to say, come join this, come join me on this journey. I don't know where we're going. We're going to promised land, but how when we're going to get there, how we're going to get there, we'll figure it out on the way together. Like yeah, can you speak to again how you got to grow your team, perhaps focusing on your first 10 hires, because I think that's the make or break from a culture and a startup evolution. So your first 10 hires, like how did you think about attracting those people? We could start with Tinashe. You're back on mute again. Okay. Let's go with Aisha, and then we'll come back to you. Your first 10 hires.
Okay, I mean, so we spoke a lot on social media about Sweep South once we launched, and sort of like tried to like hype it up. And the reason we did that was to try and get customers. It ended up actually attracting our first employee, who was someone who'd studied with me a few years behind me when I'd done genetics, and then had sort of gotten into the startup space, the edtech space, and was like, I've been watching you guys since you started speaking on Facebook, which we all used at the time. Have sort of been hearing that you guys are building, like I'd love to join. And we actually said that I think we posted that we'd set up an application page for Sweep Stars, so people, service providers, to work on the platform. And he applied for the service provider application, but said, guys, like, hear me out. I'd really love to work for you. Just give me a chance. And so we ended up bringing him on board. And I think the sort of takeaway there, and actually with the next 9 people that we hired, was they actually came through very close networks, which was important for us. And you mentioned sort of culture, and I think for us, more important in those early days than skill sets was, which was important, but less so, because you kind of diffuse it across the team and make up for each other, but was actually people who are aligned with our vision and what we're trying to build, both in terms of cool technology and a cool platform, but also the positive impact that we wanted to have on the domestic work sector and on home service providers. And then I think the other thing was just just vibe and energy. And we knew that, so the first days are very unstructured, first years are very unstructured. And so we needed people who could work with that sort of lack of certainty and lack of structure. And so one thing that we looked for is sort of, easygoing, entrepreneurial, people who aren't too rigid, who aren't going to be scared off by founders having to change course a little bit. And then only really started like specifically hiring for skills that we didn't have or weren't good enough at, I would say, like 1.5 to 2 years in.
Okay.
And so our first hire, like that, was our marketing person, where it got to a point where we were like, our marketing is embarrassing. We need someone who knows what they're doing. And so
Right.
we wanted someone who is skilled.
Yeah, I think so need-based hiring, but not just for the moment, but again, like things like for the horizons for the next 1-2 years. This actually helps us get to where we're looking to go to. Leveraging networks as well is very important. Perhaps for Tinashe, what did you sell to them? Because again, like you're just starting out. This woman might actually be living like awesome jobs and great salaries. like how, what do you tell them? Like, how do you say, like, just trust in me, like we're gonna build something amazing. Like what's the, like, how do you sell that dream? How do you attract those talents?
Well, I guess, I mean, I get the first piece, which I'm sure resonates with everyone here, is that the power of storytelling is undeniable, right? And have, great storytelling when you're authentic and you have very deep conviction, because they've got the smart people that you really want to work with have a strong bullshit detector, to be honest, like a bullshit radar. For us, I think it was getting to the point where we were going out like selling. We were genuinely talking about this, about what we believe we can build if we're able to work with you. Like, you're the missing piece in this puzzle. And I think when kind of having those discussions, we're able to kind of bring on board. I think a lot of what Aisha says resonates. Because for us it was definitely like a tiered approach to building the team. Because I mean, the way we saw it was, you have to kind of build a great team. A great team builds a great product that customers love, and if customers love a great product, then you have investors wanting to kind of back great product, and so it starts there. And I think for us it was like, well, how do we kind of reduce the risk that we make bad decisions on the team? And so naturally you kind of default back to, well, who are the great people, who are the great players I've kind of played alongside that I'd love to work with again. It may not even be in like my most recent sort of gig. And I think that's where we kind of started as like, a crew of 3 co-founders kind of working through that. And then beyond that, I guess the note on referrals, as the saying goes, birds of a feather, so it's like, well, maybe this great person, I deeply respect this person, but it might not be the right moment in time, or they're just way more expensive than what we can afford. But they probably know, as just and a lot of hires kind of that, and then finally to kind of build, a system, how process like what rates, best align or have the kind of highest finding chemistry. So I mean, it's a funny anecdote that I like to kind of tell about our sort of head of analytics and automation today. But when he first applied for the gig, it wasn't actually a referral. But when he first applied for the gig to join our team very early on, I was literally still on sales. So like I kind of have like this alter ego, sort of Jekyll and Hyde, like, hi, you're speaking to Mike. And I kind of just walk you through that. And when he applied, he actually he tested our funnel, so yeah. And during the interview, Mike, this is this is brilliant. But I mean, something as basic as that is actually, it's the crux of what you need. Is like, it's some people that have like this infinite curiosity, like they're not just going to kind of read the articles and kind of do stuff that everybody else does, but they'll be like, listen, I went through your funnel and these are the things I think are actually suboptimal right now. If it were me, I'd change that. And like, he literally came in with that. It's like, oh my gosh, where did this guy come from? Like, we don't care what seat he has to have a seat on the rocket ship. And I think we had to kind of learn, like, what are those things that we can, where do we find those clues to kind of give us an indication that this is rocket ship talent? And I think that's worked out. Like, obviously we've made some mistakes, we've made the wrong bets, and when that happens, we also just have to be frank. It serves both us and the person that's in the wrong seat. That, hey, look, we made a bad call here. Let's see how we can kind of change that. But I think like it's tough. But I think that's probably like how we continue to think about scaling talent now.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you actually put in the last part there, because again, we always assume it should all go right, but yes, you can make the wrong hire and really say, oh, this is not working, and just again learning from that process to say, okay, what did you do wrong? So I've landed this person in the first place. But yeah, you're right on that part as well, like a sense of ownership, because again, I remember like the Stripe's first support hire was actually also pretty much moderating a community of people who had issues about Stripe, and we're just offering like free support and helping them with their issue. And they're like, you know what, let's just hire this guy to come do this full time at Stripe. And so similar story as well. So again, a sense of ownership, not just saying, okay, what's the job, I'll do the job, but actually coming with initiatives as well, even as early as possible. I think that's a good flag. Tandeka, also perhaps Tobago. Let's switch it up to wow, time is really going by, and I still have a lot of things to cover. Okay, let's switch it up to partnerships. Tobago, like I think you talk about regulation needing you to actually again go find a banking partner to work with and all and all. I'm curious as well. Like again, how have you developed partnerships that has actually made you go perhaps farther than you would have gone if you were by yourself? Yeah.
That's a very good question. I think for me now, being in the CEO role, which was never the case, I was primarily the CTO. One of the key problems that I knew I had to figure out was distribution, and I think that's also, a thing that all startups try to figure out over and above product market fit. And distribution for me personally can only get you this far if you don't have if you don't have partnerships, right? And so the way we think about partnerships is bringing on board other players that complement our solution or even help us amplify the value that we're creating for our customers. And not only that, help us scale quicker or acquire customers quicker. And so overall, if you use partnerships as a way to fast growth, fast track your value creation, and also use it to learn along the ways or at least not have to do certain learnings because other people have done them before, and rely heavily on those that have, it becomes quite effective. And I think, of course, it's an art, because finding a partnership that's both sustainable, that you won't outgrow at any point, where that value that they're creating is no longer relevant, is also quite tricky. So bringing people that that are going to keep you stretched for as long as you possibly can, but are going to, from a value creation perspective and also access to market perspective. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's about partnerships.
I think what you said at the ending of what you said is really key as well, because you just mentioned that yes, it's a win-win. They're helping you grow, they're helping you with distribution, they're helping you like regulation, coverage, and all, perhaps even expansion as well, if you acquisitions and M&As to go into new markets and things like that. But I think at the same time, thinking about how would it be easy to decouple this partnership? I think that's something that people don't actually spend a lot of time on, because okay, we're married, and if we have to divorce, would it be a messy divorce, or can we actually go our ways amicably? Actually baking that in as early as possible to say, what does this look like when we actually grow to a place where we can actually go at this alone, it's actually baked in as early as possible. And that's where, again, the honest, frank conversation actually comes into place, rather than say, that would be awkward. Don't let's think about that now. When we cross that bridge, and then the bridge comes, and then it swallows everybody in.
Exactly. I think one of the risks that we also forget when we consider partnerships is that if you create that core dependency on a handful of partners who end up, potentially going under, or for whatever reason, you think of what just happened to Facebook. If your business is largely, relying on Facebook to generate revenue or anything really, and they go under, you're at a very high risk of also possibly going under. And it's also just trying to figure out a balance to mitigate those risks, where the dependency is not one way, right? It's not a one-way street, because otherwise you could get burned quite quickly. If they pull out, then you're essentially effed. So it's basically trying to balance out that act, and possibly even reverse engineering that dependency, such that in the long run they heavily to create value to their customers, or else distribution, or whatever the case might be. Awesome. So it is a balancing act, and I don't have a formula. I wish I did.
I think it's just being conscious about that. I think it should be unjust to leave this conversation without talking about two things. One, funding, because again, I like to sing we're up all night to get funding, and that's me just remixing the song, Pharrell Williams and the other guys. But funding, and Tandeka, you're the person with the money back. After your grandma said you're a bank, so I suppose let's start with you. Let's start perhaps with the landscape first of the essay, South African ecosystem, because I was looking through like again Crunchbase, like Sweet South have raised 6 million thereabouts at this publicly, and then Flex Finance have raised 6 million. I'm like, that doesn't add up. Like they've been in the game longer, but I guess again like the check sizes are bigger now. Seeds are again at what Series A used to be and things like that. Tobago, congratulations, you just got the 100K or the Google funding for Akiva Digital. So congratulations on that. So yeah, we're seeing free money, good money, smart money coming on the continent. Local investors, international investors. Yeah. If you had to like, let's say, just give us like an overview from what you've seen and Tundeka as like again how the ecosystem has actually like evolved from a funding point of view and just perhaps just maturity. Like what would that look like? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is just looking at the South African landscape over the past 10 years. So an interesting stat is that in 2019, there were 3 VC deals done in South Africa. I'm sorry, not in 2019, 2009, so about 10 years ago. So that should kind of give you an idea of just how young the ecosystem is. And looking at where venture VCs in South Africa get their funding from, the pools of funding were quite limited. So you'd have, family offices kind of putting risk capital and just seeing what they get out of it. But there's traditionally been a lack of consistent institutional funding going into the venture capital space. And I think that's kind of flowed through into the number of deals, but also just things like processes and appetite for risk. So for me, it's quite exciting to just see the inflow of capital from very competitive funds globally, because I think it's kind of putting a lighter under all of the VC funds in South Africa to say, you've kind of had this private equity lens, private equity process in place, but if you want to play VC, you kind of have to strike a balance between getting that level of confidence that you want before you're investing in a company, but then also actually just deploying capital. And there's only so much surety you can get in the process. So I think what we're starting to see with the new funds that are focusing on Africa is that it's balancing the demand and supply in the ecosystem, whereas traditionally there were about 7 to 10 venture capital funds who had most of the bargaining power. And so what you saw was startups taking a really long time to raise funding, really struggling down rounds, having to bootstrap. But now with the playing field being leveled, entrepreneurs have more bargaining power, which I think is extremely healthy for the ecosystem. You never want a power dynamic where the person with the money has all the say, and the people who are trying to actually solve real problems and build exceptional businesses are having to downplay or compromise because of an ecosystem that's not fully developed. So that's positive for us as well. I think for our team, especially, just being competitive is something that we hold in high regard. We never want to be like, okay, well, we got this money and we've arrived, because I think the true marker of whether we've done well or not is, have we supported enough businesses and have we been instrumental in moving the needle for those businesses? So I think it's a great time in the ecosystem, and our hope is that it will start to drive better behaviors from funders in the VC landscape in South Africa. But I think also to the point on partnerships as well. I think the fund management space there's a lot of moving parts, and it's quite complex. And I think just keeping your eye on the prize and just ensuring that at every point in your journey you have the right people around the table is important, because I think, honest space, like when people find out you have money, you have an influx of people like want to give you advice and want to help you do this and want to offer you the service and I think for our team in the beginning, it was just like, whoa, there's like all these people and everyone has their view on how things should be operating, and we really had to take a step back and say, what's our true north and why are we in it, and who are the people who are aligned with our value system, and kind of working with those people as opposed to just kind of entertaining anyone who has
everybody. Yeah. I was looking at the stats and it was like 2014, all of Africa actually had 26 million in funding all of Africa, and H1 of this year we've had 1.2 billion already. Just the first half of this year, 1.2 billion deployed in VC capital. So we've definitely come a long way. Tadeko, we find one way from you, like what would be like one advice? I mean, because you've seen a lot of founders pitch to you, we want funding, give us money, we'll be successful. As soon as you give us that money, we're going to be successful. Like, just give us the money already. And I'm just curious, like what is one like lesson or one thing that you want any founder in the room to go away with when it comes to actually like again engaging with investors, trying to like raise funding? Yeah.
I mean, so I'd say the two things are probably something that we admire as a team is just a high level of conviction from teams and founders. So I think in scenarios where people are fundraising, it's quite easy. And I just to I guess remind everyone, we're also fundraising, right? So as a fund, we're also fundraising alongside other founders.
You're a startup as well.
But I think just kind of like knowing what you want as a team and not kind of being like, okay, well, yeah, we're willing to like, change our strategy because this investor said, they want things to go in this way. And I think it's a hard balance because you, as a founder and entrepreneur, you want to be teachable and you want to be open to advice. But at the same time, you have to have a certain level of conviction about the space that you're playing in because investors are relying on you to drive your business. And so that level of conviction needs to be there.
Yeah.
And I think second to that, I would say just being married to the truth. I think being an entrepreneur is this weird space where you have to almost live or exist in a realm where you believe in things that aren't yet true and you're working towards proving them. But at the same time, you have to reference back to facts. So the data that's in the industry is providing you or competitors are you seeing from competitors in the space. And you're almost playing in this balance between like creating a reality that doesn't yet exist, but then also having to reference back to the facts. And I think just being married to the truth helps you in kind of building your business. And I think a lot of the time, entrepreneurs almost like married, like this is the only way and this is the way that the business is going to be. But striking that balance between seeking the truth, but I guess leaning into building the truth that no one else can see.
Yeah, that's so very, very true, and I definitely agree with you on that. That's like striking that balance. I think also for me, like I love coming away the way I feel like I get to learn something. So I'm going into actually invest, and then they actually get to teach me something because I'm like, oh no, like this, it should be this way, and they're like, oh no, based on X, Y, Z, this is how it works, and then you're like, So I mean, investors are not always looking for like the yes man and the person that just says, yeah, I'll bend over backwards and do everything it takes to actually just make sure that you actually get right with that check. Like they also, again, like I said, want to be schooled as well. But at the same time, like you should also be teachable. Don't just be, again, fixing your ways as to like, this is how things have to work. Because again, yes, you're building that future truths, but there are truths today that exist. Like for example, the size of the market. You can't debate the size of the market. This is what the market is. Yes, if you actually like, okay, with my idea, I will build a bigger market and show that. But actually, for now, your total addressable market is not fictional; it's fact. So, that's the truth. So, perhaps just before we close up, we have a few questions with from the audience, but I would like to also hear from Aisha to go into Tanashi as well, your funding stories as well. Like what's one perhaps it's a takeaway, like again, if you have to do this all over again, if you have to raise money all over again, perhaps something that you actually would have done differently based on your experience. We can start with Tanashi.
What would I have done differently in my funding journey?
Yeah.
I think I'd probably spend a bit more time on the targeting side, because I guess a lot of entrepreneurs kind of assume that it's just about kind of going out there pitching, and whoever's prepared to write a check, that's who you take. And I think we've learned this much later on in our journey, but kind of creating a structured process where you kind of know what's your hot list. If you kind of dream out the best outcome, who's on your hot list, and who are the funds that you want to kind of work with. By the way, just shout out, I'm still trying to kind of coax Tandeka Digital Africa Ventures. The day will come, just telling you. I look.
On the hot list of actually.
Look, I think it's an important point. I think going back to, I mean, I digress for a little bit, but going back to like that, what this looked like 10 years ago, like a lot of VC is like pattern matching. And the reality is like African founders didn't match the global pattern of VC. And like, I think this starts to change when you have African VC backing African tech and African founders. That's when you start to see, this change. And then secondly, obviously, shout out Paystack, Shola, Ezra, and what's been built for what's that done for the ecosystem, because like now it's not unreasonable to expect we're just around the corner from SoftBank announcing a SoftBank Africa fund, because it's like, whoa, there are exits in Africa. What do you mean? And I think like that is like an exciting, I think evolution. But I think, what I'll definitely over index on now is like, finding those funds that already have conviction in like the promise of Africa or the promise of emerging markets, and not having to kind of run, I mean, maybe it's too extreme a term, but not run the education and kind of solve for the fears and the gaps. But it's like people who are already excited, like how do I kind of find them and spend more time there versus trying to kind of get folks that are lukewarm and to get them hot. That it just didn't work. We wasted a lot of time doing that.
And that's, I mean, because again, like VC or venture or like whatever capital, I mean, it should be beyond the check. So, and I mean, for someone you've actually like schooled or educated about what you're building, you're just gonna just give you the money and just sit back and say, okay, just go build what you're gonna build. And but for someone like I said, is actually already excited about what you're building, it's more like, okay, here's a check. Okay, now let's think about like what kind of partnerships we can actually facilitate for you. How do we get you into the other market? And they're like pretty much building with you as well. So you've gotten the VC or plus an employee, if you will, to actually join your team to actually build what you're building. So I definitely hear you on that. So yeah, like again, being very intentional. I guess perhaps in the early days, like we're not sports for choices, and so you have to just go with what check you had. But now, like again, there's local capital, there's syndicates here and there, and all communities of people in the diaspora as well, pulling funds together. I think yes, now you can actually say, okay, how do I over-index for again, not just capital but smart capital, and that really would take my business to the next level. Aisha, any thoughts? What would you have done differently with your fundraise journey?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Tinashe mentioned, right? Like we weren't very strategic or structured about funding, probably like until like current funding round. So, and I think kind of left a lot of things up to chance that didn't need to be left up to chance and hope. And I think also the idea of nurturing relationships with investors super early before you even want to approach them to get involved in a round. It's difficult because we're so busy as founders that just adds another thing to your list of stuff that you have to be, doing on the side. But it helps a lot when you have investors who've been part of the journey with you and know the business, rather than like, I'm now raising, I have to catch you up on what we're about and traction and everything. And if things haven't gone exactly as planned, it's really difficult to bring them on board. So I would have nurtured relationships with investors a lot sooner before we needed to approach them for funding. I'd have also thought about varied sources. I think we were quite linear in our thinking about the sorts of investors we want to bring on board. And I think, you mentioned syndicates, different types of funding, so sort of quasi-debt and equity. Like there are lots of different ways that you can go about it. It doesn't have to be traditional, VC investors in your ecosystem. Like if you look far enough, there are enough sources of funding out there.
Yeah. I mean, sweeps out like works in South Africa, but again, the dynamics and that could be replicated in any markets, any emerging markets where again talents and those kind of services are required. So yes, they are like who's investing in the sweeps out in Southeast Asia, in Japan, and can we actually talk to them and get them excited about what we're building here, and then have them get in early. So yeah, definitely hear you on that. Tobago, do you want to just close out for us your perhaps two things? Yes. What would you have changed on your funding journey? But also perhaps on the Google announcements recently as well. Like, how do you even spot opportunities like that to actually again position yourself for this kind of funding? Yeah.
So I think I also echo what Tinashe and Aisha said around being a bit more intentional in the type of investors you bring on. For us, I mean, it was quite a long journey to fundraising, and we actually closed our first round this year. So the $1 million was the first round ever. And then thereafter, I think soon after that, we realized, oh, we could actually be a lot more intentional and almost create a Christmas shopping list of who we want in the next raise, right? And so we sort of went a bit too blue sky on that, perhaps even unrealistic at this stage, but it's worth sort of shooting the shots now. And one of the key things has always been for me personally, involving Google business quite early on, because if we are a business of collecting a lot of data and a lot of insights and using those insights to create exceptional value for people, what better company than Google? And so we've always been quite close to, getting any opportunities that Google could potentially, offer to our business. And so this is one of those things. So we were quite intentional in trying to be quite close with Google. And I think over and above just getting this I suppose, equity-free investment from Google, it's also the fact that they then saw more value in investing in us a lot more than just signing a check. And so they've even dedicated their marketing team and put us as part of their growth program, which is something they're experimenting in the whole of EMEA. And so just having Google employees work for us on the marketing for the next 6 months is, an amazing source of. So I think the other thing that I want to echo that Aisha sort of alluded to is, when you are fundraising, also be clear on what the outcome is. So if you are looking purely for resources, it's also clear, make that clear upfront. You are looking for BD people, marketing, whatever, instead of having cash in order to finance those. Because in certain instances, some organizations or even investors might give you resources instead of just cash, and that resource might actually give you a better ROI cash upfront. So those are some of the things that you might also want to plan out ahead of time, and be specific in when you do get that raise, or why are you raising in the first place, right? That what are the key resources that you need to get to move that needle or get to that point B that you need in order to be very attractive as a business. So I think the intentionality behind it is key for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a chorus that goes around the room. Like, be intentional as like who you're picking to join you on that journey, and we're at the place right now where that's possible. So yeah, take advantage of that. We've got 3 questions I want to touch on from the audience here. The first one is on talent. So with COVID and remote world, the remote world and all, like talents from anywhere could work for anywhere, for any companies anywhere as well. And so you have people like local talents working for global companies, with the Facebooks and like, again, people hiring remotely. But what that leaves is a strain on, again, the startups are trying to get local talent as well. So curious if anyone actually can share, so like your experience actually, again, attracting talent in this atmosphere of, again, anyone choosing to go work for any company, even without actually living in South Africa. Are you finding that challenging, and perhaps even more pronounced in technical talent, so software engineers and the likes? Tinashe, Toyo, Aisha, anyone has any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Specifically around engineering.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've had an interesting journey there, because I guess, like, in the beginning it wasn't as easy because we didn't necessarily have the profile, because obviously, I guess in the case of like top shelf engineers, they could be anywhere, and the demand for them is pretty high, and folks are willing to pay a hell of a lot,
Premium.
For them, and I think we had to kind of be creative. I think to some extent we tried to leverage other businesses that were looking to solve that exact problem. So there was a period in time, and still is actually, that we kind of work with the likes of Andela, and then kind of tap into talent even outside of South Africa. So it's like, well, we can tap into some engineering in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Kenya, and that's one way of kind of moving fast, because I think the key thing is kind of balancing speed, with this pursuit of quality. But I think as we've now scaled and built more of a profile, we are kind of finding that growing interest in wanting to kind of be part of it. So we had to de-risk a bit of that. If someone is like literally looking at should I work for Amazon or should I work for Flex Club? You know, it's not like that big, you know, a decision, especially if you know that you'll have a lot more ownership kind of going into the Flex Club team. But it took a bit of time, and I think it's great to see that that's evolved. But also because of remote working, we also have learned now that actually it's not impossible for us to have engineers that live in other parts of Africa that are part of the core team. And I think that's a really exciting evolution now. I don't think that was necessarily like the default, you know, kind of a few years ago.
I guess pretty much like get in the game, go look for where where talent is as well. I mean, I heard of a team in Africa who's got like talents out of Poland, and yeah, that was, and I mean, it's working really well for what they're building. So yeah, I think also a sense of ownership as well, like that. There's always this like, again, like, oh well, Amazon Flex Club, like, yeah, it's a no-brainer, Amazon, but you'll find out some actually like even high talents will say, you know what, like, yes, I could get an Amazon job if I just sent my CV, but I want to actually go build something with, again, a very small team, and really have a sense of ownership. So yeah, don't undersell yourself, if you will, to attract those kind of talents as well. There's a question to Aisha about marketplaces, with especially around, like, again, just quality control. So like, how do you vet and train individuals? How do you, like, again, make sure, again, like, because those things are like, yes, I mean, there's so much you could control, like, you're depending on other people to actually, again, keep quality of service really high. So like, again, how do you, again, keep things going and maintaining a very high bar when it comes to Sweeps Out?
So, I mean, I also wanted to just make a very quick comment around hiring. I think one of the things we've tried to focus on is that, like, know what your secret sauce is, like, and lean in on that. So what are the things that are part of your values, your culture, your vision that aren't just about a salary? And how do you lean in on those things and make sure that you then attract the right talent? Around vetting, so I think it's been really important for us to picture ourselves as the customer, like, always, and as a CEO to be the voice of the customer. And so I really make sure that anyone in the team, not just sort of team members who are sort of operational or dealing directly with customers, view themselves as potential customers using our platform. And when you look at yourself in that way, then any issues become just unacceptable. And so we have very strict, vetting processes. Obviously, we do things like, the background checks and the, and criminal checks and reference checks, et cetera, and all of that stuff. But I think it's more about, like, how as a team you view those processes and sort of putting yourself in your customer's shoes and saying, how would I feel? And so all of our team use our service. They all give feedback on their experience with the service. All of our team have access to our dashboards that show our metrics and have to sort of focus in on their specific functions and should be able to give feedback on, where things are trending. And I think that helps you, again, with, we've talked a lot about ownership, but making sure that everyone takes ownership for the overall sort of experience and quality of experience that customers have.
Yeah. I find it weird when I hear people like Patrick Collison for Stripe say, like, every now and then we actually just spin up a new Stripe account, walk through the process, call support, and just test the different, like, risk shields and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I hope I'm not at the receiving end of your calls one of these days. But yeah, I think, I've been pretty much like dog food in, like, having your customers, having your team use the service, find the pain points, flag them, fix them. I think that's how you actually keep a high bar. Awesome. And I think that's it for today. But I think I'd like to get a final word from just all of you. Just again, folks in the room are building or would want to actually, again, be where you are. Yeah, we said again, it's not all glamorous. There's heartache, there's burnouts that comes with this. So please take care of yourself. Mental health is real. Like, just again, therapy works, helps. Please try it. But yeah, just curious as to, like, again, just on your journey, just reflect as to, like, okay, the journey so far. And I know you're actually going. You're again not there yet. I'm very sure you have, like, bigger aspirations and conquering Africa and the world. Like, what's just, like, one thing that you like? This has been very instrumental. It could be advice. It could be what somebody said, a book you read, someone you came across that you're like, okay, yeah, like, this person or this thing actually like is very pivotal to my journey, and I wish other people could also like could have access to a benefit from that as well. So yeah, I'll give you a minute to think about that. In the meantime, for others on the call, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have a breakout session where you can like again, we're going to be like getting 4 or 5 people randomly put into rooms where you can actually again network, which is something that again Startup Grind is very popular for. So you might just find your next co-founder, your next investor in those calls, in those breakout rooms. So please stick with us. Right after we just again get this, find a round of answers from our panelists. But yeah, we'll have that shortly on the back of this. But thanks so much for sticking with us for the last hour and a half. So yeah, who wants to go first? No pressure, Buddhas and Yodas in the.
Happy to take a swing. Yeah, I think for me, like, if I guess for all the builders, I think the one thing that's definitely resonated with me is, kind of being okay with being vulnerable. I think when you're kind of building a product, you invest a lot of yourself and you feel like you've tied your personal identity to the success of this product. But I think if you move away from this idea of pursuing perfection, that's how you achieve speed. And speed is your friend. Otherwise, you kind of land up in this like loop. I've been in these terrible loops where I'm now theorizing perfection and there's like inertia. I'm not moving. Just rather get out there and be prepared to hear someone say your product sucks. It means you're making progress. So I think just resist the temptation to kind of overly theorize this. It's about being in the ring, improve your technique, get it out there, get feedback from customers. And if you continue to obsess about that and getting better each time, I can guarantee you the rest will fall into place. I'm not to oversimplify, but I think that's true.
Okay, thank you so much, Nasha. Yeah, anyone else?
I'm happy.
Maybe a few things, because it's hard to sort of narrow it down on one. But I think like staying in your lane has been super important. And I think there's this narrative, I don't know where it comes from, particularly with tech startups, that like you need to be crushing it all the time and you've got to, become a unicorn in like 2 years and whatever. And I think it's been super important for me to sort of have my own idea of our longer term strategy, our longer term vision, and then just continue executing on it, but don't get too caught up in what the rest of the world or the rest of the ecosystem thinks that you should do or be, or, and then I think reading, like read. I've read The Hard Thing About Hard Things 3 times, I think. I read every day a lot. Like there's so much that I don't know as a founder, as an operator, as a leader. And I think it's just so important to have an open mindset and a growth mindset. And then I think the last thing that has been absolutely pivotal for me and kind of speaks to what Tanasha was saying, and that I've really leaned in on over the last 18 months with COVID and trying to deal with the impact that it's had on our company, is self-awareness, and just general awareness and connecting to yourself and knowing who you are, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, and this internal sense of strength. So I think as founders, it's such a difficult journey. It's so hard. And at the end of the day, you've got to be able to rely on yourself, but you've also got to know that your entire life is not about this one element of it that you're building.
I'm happy to go next. I think for me, probably the biggest lesson, at least over the past year and a half, has been, it's, to Tanasha and Aisha's point, it sometimes feels like nonstop, whether you go to sleep or whatever you're doing, the business is still running. And so it's very difficult to detach yourself from this thing you're building, because to a large extent, it is kind of you, and does depend on you being around quite a bit. And so I used to go from intense pushes to then crashing and burning, to intense pushes to crashing and burning. And something that I learned over the past year was actually just trying to structure rest in and how I run my life. So small pockets of rest in between kind of the big pushes, so that it kind of flows into business, as opposed to it being these kind of extreme fluctuations. And I think the second thing would just be surrounding yourself with people who kind of model where you want to be. And I think for us, that's initially it was like advisors, investment committee members, but actually over the past year, it's been entrepreneurs. We've engaged with a lot of entrepreneurs who've kind of raised the bar for us and been like, oh, okay, as an investor, this is a new standard that we've seen in engaging with entrepreneurs that we can apply in-house to ourselves. And the more we've modeled or indexed spending time with people who want to be like, we've started to see those kind of changes happen within our business. And then tied to that, I'd say asking for help. I think from our perspective, at least in the beginning, it felt like everyone expected that we would know what we're doing, along the investment process. And over time, we realized that actually, we've never done this before. And there are a lot of people who've done it really well all over the continent. And the thing that was really heartwarming for us was to see just how many people were actually willing to help us without being judgmental. From entrepreneurs who've raised successfully to other investors who've, run funds before. And the more we've asked for help, the better we've become as well. So I think those would be my 3.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so a lot of good sort of closing remarks. I think for me, in addition to what everyone said, would just be as an entrepreneur, to remember to celebrate, the small wins. I think a lot of times we always think that there'll be a moment in time where, you IPO or you become a unicorn or you get a Stripe or whoever. But that moment might not happen. The reality is it won't happen for everyone, right? And so the journey in itself has got so many successes if we choose to recognize them. And I think one of them is being able to survive the pandemic, still have, the willpower to even push and have resilience to build whatever incredible thing you're building, is in itself a success. And I think, we don't give ourselves enough credit for such things. We're healthy. We have people we love who are still sticking around, even though we don't always show up because of work. And so the good things and small little successes that we keep missing because we think, I'll only celebrate when I make $10 million in revenue, or when I do this, or when I close this round. And so, I think just be wary of all those small little wins, because they could even be that energizes you to keep going, and could also be the little things that help you get even more people invested in walking this journey with you. So that's my closing remark.
Everybody, I think for me, like, to summarize, stay in your lane, be customer obsessed, and keep on doing what you're doing. Read a lot, because it's okay not to know it all. Pocket of rest between your pushes and your grinds. Surround yourself with people who model where you want to be, and celebrate those small wins. I think that's, if you just again stick with those principles, if you will, we'll be better off. But again, like I said, thank you so much, all of you. I really wish you all the success that comes with what you're doing. And hopefully perhaps folks on the call as well, you're inspired to go build, to continue grinding, and perhaps even join these folks as well if you're hiring, to also again build what they're doing as well. But yeah, this has been a pleasure. I'll just hand over back to Adela to just help us with the transition from this again into the breakout rooms. After a quick plug. But yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you all our attendees for coming through today. I hope we all enjoyed or took us away from those honest startup conversations. Until next time.
My name is Shola Akinade, co-founder and CEO of Paystack. I grew up in Lagos, started writing software 2002, 2003. That's when I met Ezra. We went to school together at Babcock University. Sometime in 2015, I figured out that I could charge a card from my computer, that it was cool. And so I was like, yo, guy, this is a company. This is Stripe. We became the first Nigerian company to get into YC. Our story was very simple. The only way we could describe Paystack was like Stripe for Africa. So many people were asking me, oh, do you want to make Stripe for Stripe? Like, do you want to be the real Stripe? And we did that. Say $8 million from Stripe and Visa.
Quickly, you have raised $10 million to date, and you just finished your Series A, which is at $8 million. So tell us.
Both companies are really, really aligned. I think we're trying to do the same thing, help people start and scale internet businesses.